You referred to the fact that Israel could not be carrying out this genocide without the support of, as I mentioned, the very countries that claim to have established a new system since the Second World War that would ensure that the horrors that occurred during that period would not happen again. And it is those very countries that, in fact, are carrying out the genocide. If we are frank and honest about what is happening, Israel could not possibly do what it has been doing for so long without the full support of some of these Western powers, principally, of course, the United States of America, but not excluding countries in Europe such as the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and others. Now, how do we are, I think you said, somebody said, the subaltern nations. How can we force the hand of these great powers? We can't yet, but we will be able to over time. Because this is a small group now, but it will grow. It will have to grow in the same way that the comrade from Namibia mentioned how that grew over time. The problem here is that it took so long for that to happen. And the same with the South African apartheid situation. It took decades of work. And we can't afford that much time now. So we really have to call on not just states, but on peoples all over the world, in Europe and North America especially, because they have to make enough noise to convince their governments to stop the crimes that they are committing. This genocide is not just Israel doing it. It's all these powers that are guilty and that they have to be brought to account by their own peoples, really. So that we have to depend and we have to try and stir up the conscience of the peoples of these countries and to get civil society, ordinary people, to stop just living their ordinary lives and watching the horrors and the massacres, unbelievable things that you wouldn't have believed possible. You know, like the videos that the Israeli soldiers show, you know, of the atrocities that they are committing, boasting about it. That they only do that because they know that they will not be held to account. And they know that because of these Western countries supporting that. So our job has to be to try to stir the conscience of peoples in these countries, as well as in our own countries, to do everything we can. Never rest for a moment, as long as these atrocities are taking place. And, as I think a couple of people have mentioned, ceasefire doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean the end of the suffering. The end of the genocide doesn't mean the end of the problem. There's apartheid still. How can we sit here and allow an apartheid nation to exist? What right does a nation that is a genocidal and apartheid nation or regime, that regime has no right to exist as such? And we have to factor that into our minds and stop this nonsense about the right to defend and so on, which is what? Right to kill, not to defend. And so really it is a call for the conscience of mankind and womankind, I should say, throughout the world, but especially perhaps in the Western nations where it can make a difference in forcing their own governments to change the policy and to stop the apartheid, stop the genocide, and above all, give the people of Palestine the right to self-determination, because if you do that, everything else will fall into place. Of course, you can't have right to self-determination if there is no self, and that is the policy of the Zionist regime, to eliminate the selves, the individuals, get rid of all the Palestinians, clean the land, which has been their policy and their intention from the get-go, from the beginning. And the world has just allowed that to continue. Hopefully, the horrors that they see now, if they think about it properly, they will see it was inevitable. It is inevitable. A colonial settler regime must exterminate the native. That must be its intent. And they've been hiding it for some time, and people have been pretending that that is not so. But I think the realities of what they're seeing now will convince everybody that we can't tolerate that anymore. We can't allow this impunity to go on, because, I mean, you know, I blame us, the international system, the international countries. If we had stopped impunity 50 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, what is happening today would not be happening. So the blood that has been spilled is on the hands of the international community, and in particular of those Western countries that not just tolerate, but support and feed that genocide. Friends and comrades all, especially the journalists, Belize applauds Progressive International for convening this group, and the government of the Republic of South Africa for leading the way in seeking to bring justice for the people of Palestine, including by taking Israel's genocide for reckoning to the International Court of Justice, a case that Belize has applied to intervene in. In a profound and disturbing irony, the genocide in Gaza in the past 16 months is enabled by the very powers that established the world system of international law and humanitarian law. This genocide is flaunted by the perpetrators, including by shredding the UN Charter before the astounded delegates to the General Assembly, symbolically enacting what the Zionist state has been allowed to do since its inception. Belize is honored to be part of an initiative that seeks to uphold the right of peoples to self-determination, the erosion of which could pose an existential threat to Belize's peaceful and secure existence with territorial integrity. It is a right that cannot be bartered away, nor subjected to conditions. Decades ago, the architect of South Africa's apartheid politics, Hendrik Verwoerd, famously remarked, quote, "Israel, like South Africa, is an apartheid state," end of quote. The Zionist regime approved of the Bantustans created by the apartheid South Africa and now intends a similar fate for the Palestinians at best. That is to crowd 14 million of them into 13% of Palestine in an entity that would be nominally independent but totally reliant on Israel for its very existence. The real intent of the Zionist state, however, is to cleanse the land of all Palestinians. From as far back as 1917, when the British government assumed the right to dispose of the land of Palestine to immigrants from Europe, thereby creating a policy based on the extermination of the native, Palestinians have been denied the right of self-determination. They have been the exception to the norm applied to all others, while the Zionist regime has been exempted from observance of that and other basic international jus cogens norms, including the prohibition of acquiring territory by force. In its 2024 advisory opinion, the ICJ confirmed the Palestinians' right to self-determination to be peremptory, one from which no derogation is permitted. The court found that Israel's presence in the OPT is illegal and must be ended ASAP. The continuing denial to Palestinians of their inalienable rights and the impunity afforded to the State of Israel. Denial, impunity, two sides of the same coin. This is a critical moment in history when we either allow this exceptionalism and impunity to continue, or we take action to uphold international law and justice. It is the Palestinian people, including all refugees since the Nakba of 1948, the Palestinian people who have the right of return, and they alone who must decide their future through a genuine exercise of self-determination. Our declaration of commitments is hopefully only a first step in achieving the end of apartheid and colonialism in Palestine, and in ensuring that the principles of justice and inalienable rights apply to Palestinians as they do to all peoples. Thank you.